Welcome back. It's all the rage. You've seen the commercials for 23andMe and Ancestry.com. Find out where you came from. The answer might be a little different than your folks told you. In some cases, people are tracking down and meeting long-lost relatives. Wow. On the other hand, are you considering who now has your DNA information? Can they sell it? Use it for research? Is there a possibility of your DNA information, including genetic disorders, finding their way to, let's say, your insurance company? And joining us for more are ABC7 broadcast director Chris Molinez, who just found out his long-lost relatives through 23andMe and Ancestry.com, our consumer watchdog Jerry Zivic, and ABC7 reporter Adam Cellini. And Chris, let me start with you. By the way, if you're doing this right now, who's directing the broadcast? That's another show. Chris, what motivated you to go to 23andMe and Ancestry.com to find the answers to your family history?
Well, I've known, growing up, I've known I was adopted for years. When I was about 6 years old, my great-grandmother accidentally let it slip. Passively in a conversation with my parents and me. They were talking about something, to be honest with you, I don't remember, and she casually mentioned, oh, well, she doesn't get that from you guys, she gets that from, oh, her. And my parents kind of bugged out a little bit at first, and on the way home we had a long conversation about, you know, what it means to be adopted. I was 6. So for as long as I can remember, I've always known I was adopted. My parents never kept it from me. I was young at that age, so that's partially why they hadn't told me, but they had always intended to tell me. I have a younger brother who we also knows he was adopted, and he was told when he was a bit older than I was when I found out. So it's never been a question for me, you know, that I was adopted. What drove me to go to Ancestry and 23andMe was for one thing, New York State is a closed state. I was adopted, so all of my records are sealed. I could not get any information, anyhow, any way, about who my biological mother was, who my biological father was, any medical history from either maternal or paternal, anything of that sort. So to find out this information, I had to do the research myself, and doing that research online when you have absolutely nothing to go to. I knew my mother was 23 years old. I knew she had some challenges, and that's it. And then biological dad, nothing. There was nothing listed, no information at all.
Adam, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Whether it's 23andMe or Ancestry.com, how many people go there to find lost relatives, and how many people go there in terms of finding out whether they're Irish, French, Italian? Is there a percentage?
I don't know the exact percentages, but I can say that there are multiple reasons other than just finding family. A lot of people have medical questions, you know, about their past and are trying to track down that information. 23andMe just came out with another test for women to see if they have a certain gene that I guess is conducive to a type of breast cancer. So this is kind of the new frontier that's happening with this testing. As you mentioned, other people just wanting to find out their ethnicity, and Ancestry.com is actually working on a bigger project right now to build a database of ethnicities. Sometimes in certain countries where people aren't doing these DNA tests, whether it's they don't have access to the internet or don't have the finances, they're trying to get more info, more data, more DNA from those areas, and better specify what you are. Right now, you could get lumped into a country that you really have no connection to. So there's a lot of different reasons. I don't know the exact percentages, and it seems like kind of hit or miss. Some people go to it for family, and then some people just end up finding family.
Jerry, if you could use this opportunity as a teaser, because obviously Chris's experience is just absolutely wonderful, but there are certain things out there for a consumer watchdog that are red flags, and briefly, what would that be?
I think you have to be prepared to be really surprised, and be prepared for the machine of evil to do something really negative.
I guess that's what we call a tease.
Yeah, that's what you asked for, to do something really negative with your data. If you think about it, all this internet, hasn't it all, everything that was supposed to be so good has become so distorted and so misused. Our privacy is lost. So it could be a really terrible thing what's going to happen.
Okay, hold that thought. We are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on DNA testing right after we check the first alert forecast. Stay with us. Welcome back. DNA testing. You could find out a lot about yourself, and so could others. Joining us for more are ABC7 broadcast director Chris Molinez, who just found his long-lost relatives through 23andMe and Ancestry.com, our consumer watchdog Jerry Zivic, and ABC7 reporter Adam Cellini. And Chris, You know what Jerry is going to say about concerns that he has about privacy issues. How did you balance your desire to find your family with knowing that a lot of people do raise questions about what they do with your DNA information after you're done?
I did a lot of research. I read the privacy statements, 23andMe, Ancestry, and I more or less went in pretty much knowing, you know, what, for the most part, they did with my data. Now, on Ancestry's website, their privacy statement states quite clearly that your DNA results, your raw DNA results, are your property. They cannot and will not sell that property to anyone for any other purposes. They do request, and I did consent in my case, for that you would allow for your results to be used for research. What that research is, I really didn't dig into. To be perfectly honest with you, in my opinion, I wanted to contribute what I could to a good cause.
We have some of those privacy statements. Let's put them up on the screen here in terms of genetic health risks, finding out things that you may not know about yourself. Our reports do not include all possible genetic variants that could affect these conditions. Other factors can also affect your risk of developing these conditions, including lifestyle, environment, and family history. When it comes to genetic issues, that you can request the destruction of your biological samples, and you must contact member services for that. And you can request Ancestry to delete your DNA data. We will delete all genetic information, including any derivatives, genetic information, from our production, development, analytics, and research systems for 30 days. And finally, it says in terms of when you download your DNA information, your DNA data belongs to you. You should always have the option of downloading a file with your DNA data, and it shows you how you could do that. So Jerry, based on what Chris says and some of these disclosures here, do any of your concerns, are they allayed at all?
No, because I'm sure, I'm 90% sure, let me back off a little, that if you'll read fine print somewhere, there's a way that they can obfuscate all of those issues. What happens if the company gets sold? Do those promises survive a sale? Or what happens, just like if you read your HIPAA disclosure, the doctor has the right to change it whenever they want. So if they change those rules, are they going to notify you that we've changed what we're doing? No, the burden's all upon the consumer. And this is to me, it's not really truthful.
Is there any evidence out there that people's DNA information are being sold to whatever companies, or, as I brought up earlier, possibly being leaked back to your insurance company? And you could see what the problem would be there. Let's say you have a genetic disposition for, let's say, breast cancer. You know, an insurance company might be less likely to want to insure you.
Theoretically, health insurance companies can't use that information. However, we're living in a time when regulations are being dismantled at an alarming rate. There's a law called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act that's supposed to protect people's privacy. But there are so many holes in that act. If you're a company that has less than 15 employees, you're not even covered by that act. And it does not, what happens if you're going for life insurance? What happens if you're going for disability insurance? It's not covered. They can use that information. And you're not allowed to use that information when you hire somebody. However, companies have done that, and there's a lot of lawsuits about that.
And here's the other question. Who is regulating this?
Well, in terms of GINA, this Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, that's being done basically by the EEOC. They're the ones that are enforcing this as being unequal. But then there's also a whole overlay with the ADA. If you have a genetic problem, does a company have to make a reasonable accommodation under the ADA?
But I would actually ask the question is would the science hold up in court in terms of whether genetic research shows that, say, you have a disposition towards cancer. I know with 23andMe and the results that you get from them, they state very clearly that those results only group you in a group of people who share similar genetic markers. It does not state that just because you share that marker with a person that you will get that disease or condition. So would that hold up in court? I would think not. In most legal situations, facts rule the day, not theory.
Jerry, you're the lawyer.
I'm not exactly sure what you're concerned about, what's going to hold up in court.
Okay, but on 23andMe, when you get your genetic health results, they state that, for example, certain amount of out of 100 people, 40 people carry a similar genetic marker, all had cancer. Okay, but the other 60% of the people did not, and they still carry that marker. So they would tell you that you have a 40% chance of getting cancer. But they also state on there that this is simply theoretical science.
So they're opting out, and that's part of the whole thing.
No, they're not opting out. They opted into it. They carried that same genetic marker, but they didn't have cancer.
But the company is opting out of any responsibility, and that's part of the whole scary thing about finding out this information.
But that's not the question I was asking. I was asking how would that hold up in court?
I think what Chris is asking is if you find that you were denied coverage because a genetic marker indicated you may get cancer.
It's 23andMe research.
Right.
Well, sure, it would hold up. It would be a violation on part of the insurance carrier. But the reality of it, let's look at this in a real basis. Who's going to insure insurance? Who's going to sue an insurance company? You're talking about huge amounts of resources to be able to do that, and the average person won't be able to do that.
Adam, I wanted to bring up another issue. We could get to that in a second, but another issue that you talked about in your story. I mean, we all stood around the TVs when you did the story of Chris finding his family, but not every search has a happy outcome. Not every reunion results in a lifelong relationship here. And is that becoming a growing issue with this testing?
It is. There are, for every handful of stories, there are like Chris's or Joanne's, like we saw in the piece. There are other stories of maybe somebody who, donated DNA in college and never expected to see a biological kid knocking on their door 30 years later, but it's happened. It has happened because you can track down that person. And when you made that donation, you signed a non-disclosure agreement, but who's recognizing the non-disclosure now? I don't know if there is anyone at fault, but there are plenty of those stories. Closed adoptions, that kid may have been put up for adoption for a reason. That parent still may not want to face, that part of their life, and that exists out there. Obviously, we haven't gotten personally in touch with any of these stories, but I've read about them, I've heard about them. They are happening out there. So, that's why I kind of included that piece with Cece Moore, who made the DNA Detectives Facebook page, who's saying, she warns people that are looking for family, don't expect a relationship. And Chris and I talked about that too. You can't go in with expectations of a relationship because you don't know how these people are going to react.
And that's actually very common on the Facebook page. On the DNA Detectives site, which I'm a member of on there, you see exactly the stories that you're talking about. There have been a few posts where people who their parentage donated, and that's what brought them about, and there's ethical concerns by them and other people regarding that.
We have to take a quick break, and we'll be back for final thoughts in a moment. Stay with us. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts, and we'll start with you, Adam, because with all these concerns that are out there, how careful are these companies in terms of making sure that in terms of public relations and in terms of policy that they are not going over the line?
Publicly, they seem to be acting very careful about it. They haven't really been tested yet. I think we're still going to be pushing that envelope through this year with lawsuits, court cases. The Golden State Killer, that was kind of a big issue that came up because they found that suspect through the DNA testing sites, and there were a lot of questions. How did they find him? So I don't think we know the answers to those yet. I think we're going to find out a lot over this year and the next year.
And Jerry, is government at any level getting involved in terms of regulating them, in terms of the results of their testing, the quality of their testing?
They're way far behind the curve on this. There are no standards, and the FTC always talks about efficacy, and there has to be backup when you make a claim. There's no rules or regulations on this. These people can make any claims they want, and there's nobody really to hold them to it.
Chris, you heard what the risks are and what Jerry's concerns are, but I would imagine that inside here that at this point you know things, you have answers to questions that you always had, and what has happened since that meeting?
Well, I've gotten to know my biological sister and brother, and I have another biological sister. I have a lot of biological siblings, it turns out. I have another biological sister in California who I've gotten to know very well. We have a very nice relationship fostering. I have a biological sister from my mother's side in St. Louis that we're just starting to get to know each other. I have a biological brother who actually just reached out to me for the first time this weekend. I had been kind of sending him Facebook messages like, hey, how you doing? And his sister finally got in touch with him and said, hey, this is your brother. And he's, oh my gosh. So me and him talked for like an hour on Saturday for the first time, which was kind of cool. I'd like to make one point. Adam pointed out the California killers, the Golden State Killer case. GED Match, which is what the police used in that case, is not a DNA testing site. That is a public DNA database where you can upload your DNA results to. I'm not saying what was done was not unethical per se, but they don't, what I wanted to clarify is they don't do testing. That's people who get results upload voluntarily to that site.
And that's a story for another time. But thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of you had to say about Friday night's show on the school shooting in Texas. 10 people were killed, 10 others were injured. A 17-year-old student arrested for allegedly opening fire in the school. The suspect used a shotgun belonging to his father. Like with other school shootings in the past, change is being demanded, whether it's better background checks or stricter gun laws. But will this actually change anything? We went to Facebook for your thoughts, and Michael says, I guess that blows the raise the age to purchase guns theory. Once again, you have to get the mentally ill kids out of the school system. You have to address that first. Alice says, why aren't the parents being held accountable for having unsecured weapons in their house and not knowing what their kid was doing online? And Casey says, better parenting, ending bullying, and working on mental health issues. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation on tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast.com.abc7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. We want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. ABC7 broadcast director Chris Milanese, who just found his long-lost relatives through 23andMe and Ancestry.com. Our consumer watchdog Jerry Zivick, and ABC7 reporter Adam CELLINI.